What's good everybody? Ivy here. Glad to see you all again in the new episode of Metal Mixing Guide podcast. This one is dedicated to my mix for latest video of Inner Sanctum, death metal band from India. You can check out full version by following link in the description. Live performance, crushing riffs, plus the video itself is in 360 degrees, so I really suggest you to give it a shot. This mix is basically updated version of the one that I did for this band in context of Production Diaries number 4. The main difference is that instead of targeting for big stage feeling, we now have more of a studio sounding, little closer to the album. And of course I was able to substitute real drums and bass with virtual replicas, so it perfectly fits Metal Mixing Guide series. Before we start, I'd wanted to announce important changes about my videos. It seems that nobody really wants to see all those comparisons with weird attempts to explain all the chaos in my projects. MMG number 22 is a pretty good example. The video is nearly 2 hours long with only 4 minutes of average viewing time. So starting from this episode I'll divide the videos into 2 parts. The main one will only include essential or interesting stuff about templates together with brief explanations of processing logic. And second video will include complete run-on project settings. You can watch it following link in the description. And just as always, if you're interested in getting additional files for this episode, you can get it on my Patreon. The file pack includes projects for Cubase and Reaper, instrument snapshots, module presets, impulses and other necessary data. For just $1 per month you will get access to this, and all the other projects I've made throughout the years. This way you can support my work and help me keep doing what I do. You will find link down below. Now with all that being said, let's get right into it. First in line is a drum sampling template. At this stage it sounds like this. If you remember, original project was based on drums from Production Diaries number 3, so that's what I used as a source for replication of other elements of the kit. The project suffered pretty extreme reconstruction. Good example of that are updated tone correction impulses. They now include nearly half of post-equalization moves from the old project. That allowed for processing chains to be much shorter and less stressful on CPU, basically giving instant massive change in the tone with only one module. Since K-Fire is not available anymore, I used to replace it with Pulse from Lancaster Audio. The only downside of this convolver is that low and high pass filters can't be turned off. In order to compensate for that I'm using Pro Q with exact same settings after each unit of pulse. Next up, additional layers for kick and snare. First one is supposed to play the role of live kick we've had on record. With a bit of processing on top it pretty much works the same way, adding variety to the overall kick sounding. Second element is a custom library created out of processed chunks of live snare from original recording. Since I used pretty heavy gating style editing based on starting points of snare hits, I was able to take the chunks out of mix and put them in a form of library. It adds up with the main snare almost the same way. Another change is that instead of copying MIDI to all the tracks, we now use MIDI send, so you only have to care about the writing of main part. Important to say that additional kick's supposed to have velocity of 107, while the main one is constantly on 127 value. That's why I use MIDI modifier with -20 velocity offset for this send. Now when the part is written, it's time to export the stems. The export should be done in 2 passes. Don't worry, you'll get the point later. Mute all the notes except for kick for first export, and when it comes to the second one do the opposite. Export markers are included in track names, So all you have to do is type E1 or E2 to choose target channels for each export. It's important to do it in 32 bits floating point to avoid clipping while transferring the audio between projects. Next up, the bass. Main part of reamping chain remains the same as it was in Production Diaries number 4, except for post-correction impulse update, in order to get rid of unnecessary post-equalization. This time we're going to use Ample Metal Ray 5 library as a replacement for live bass. I use 0 milliseconds start value to save the attack. That of course compensated with track time offset of -50 milliseconds. When it comes to programming, all the notes are at 121 velocity. And since I wanted to have total control over performance, I programmed key switches to tell the sampler which strings I want to use, although for this part I only used fourth one. Here's the trick on how to quickly create basic key switch pattern for further programming. Highlight all the notes, copy-paste them and hit Ctrl-Enter after entering the pitch value of the key switch you want. After that move the entire key switch pattern back in time just a bit. The point is that you have to provide the sampler with key switch information before the actual notes start. When it comes to processing, I just used matching impulse to transform source tone of AMR to the one we've had on record. That allows to get same kind of responsive reamping chain. The main problem now is complete lack of attack. In order to fix that I use exact copy of this instrument, with all the notes moved to slap left articulation. On top of basic correction impulse I used additional EQ to keep it clean and focused, and right after, SPL Transient Designer to get rid of sample tails. Both channels then routed to reamping bus. Forgot to say that I use Soothe in front of a chain, in order to take control over unwanted string noises around 3 kHz. After the part is written, export the stem from bass group. Make sure that mono flag is checked. Next stop is guitar reamping project. This one is pretty much the same as Production Diaries version. There's really nothing much to talk about. All I did was updating old impulses to include EQ correction from master project. When it comes to the export, you should use multi-out mode with mono button checked. And don't forget to keep the panning at center in case if you changed it during recording or editing process. Now all the stems are loaded to master project for final processing. First up, we sum kick together with its bleed from snare track under the kick bus. Bleed track is boosted by 5 decibels and processed with EQ in such a way that it gives strong mid-range support to the main kick, otherwise it would be kinda lifeless. Entire sum then polished with EQ and processed with low-end focus, to keep lows tight and punchy. We also have sidechain sends to first soothe and chain for both bass and guitar groups. Snare and snare room sums up on snare bus to get rid of annoying sliding resonance around 500 Hz. There is also send to reverb for obvious reasons. Now the hat. Point of this chain is to make hi-hat less robotic. First I process it with stereo enhancer to adjust hat position in stereo field. Then Saturn's transient shaper to boost the tails of signal. This move makes hi-hat pretty rich and compressed, it kinda sounds more natural. And finally spectrum adjustment in order to get better interaction with overheads. This cut by the way was doubled on OH room track. Both channels seem to have the same problem. Now the bass. As I already said, this soothe works in sidechain mode, getting control signal from kick bus. Basically it takes out low end space for kick drum hits, makes it easier for master compressor to handle the work on that part of spectrum. Other than that, we use 2 steps of spectrum correction to properly integrate the bass into the mix. Now last part of mix is guitar bus. Same as on bass, first soothe works in sidechain mode, taking out kick related frequencies in the middle of stereo. That helps to make the kick just a little more focused. Next 4 modules are dedicated to particular parts of spectrum. Entire purpose of this cascade is to make guitars much more stable in the mix spectral wise. Next EQ is part of tone-related post-correction. I couldn't put it back in chain to be included in main impulse, because it would change responsive soothe modules. Last EQ targets for a specific mid-range resonance, though I'm not really sure that it will be present if different instrument is used. Now finally all the tracks are routed to master bus. Part of this chain straight up doubles original settings of Production Diaries episode. That includes input attenuation, NLS bus and isotope multibin compressor settings. Then we use ProR to give our mix roomy feeling. 2 modules of Soothe. First works extremely subtle and targets for high part of the spectrum, while second one is used for low-end stabilization. Stereo enhancer to adjust the stereo field according to album sounding. And FabFilter Pro Q with spectral matching for the same reason. I know it looks kinda extreme, but keep in mind that the scaling is set to 3 decibels. Next one, cutting lows on side of the stereo. It's important to keep this one in phase linear mode, so problems with phase between mid and side components can be avoided. And final element is the limiter to gain loudness and stabilize them peaks. So that's pretty much it for this episode. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon in the next one.